The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people are evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family member was being evacuated, the group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha everyone, I'm Geologist Philip Ong here with Mr. Dane DuPont from hvary.org and Hawaii Tracker, bringing you guys their Hawaiian Volcano Tracker update. Today is Thursday, August 10th, 2023, and we were just right up top, just share with you guys that our hearts are heavy today with the news coming from Lahaina and Maui with their wildfires. Lots of destruction, a lot of casualties there, so we know that there's a lot of members of our community, people around who are still waiting to hear from their loved ones, friends over there. So to respect all of that, we're going to try to keep it a little bit abbreviated here today, but we did want to offer a space as well that we could all come together and share our thoughts and, really be together because it is a huge tragedy we see unfolding in our neighbor island across in Maui over there. So I'm not going to ask you exactly how you're feeling today, Dane, but it's good to have you with me here and
to
add.
Yeah, so change of schedule. We're huge curveball with this disaster. We had fires burning on Big Island, and we were trying to do stuff on Hawaii Tracker with those, following those, and kept hearing like Maui, 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 and then just saw how bad it actually was. It was, takes you back a second, and even like going through stuff, it's like they never gets easier, these type things, right? Like to see these happen, these massive catastrophic events. So yeah, we were going to try and do a stream yesterday. That was going to be our third talk story about recovery from the 2018 eruption with the constituents, the stakeholders, county, but felt like it was not the appropriate time. And yeah, that was the right call, especially the more we know about the gravity and the severity of the situation on Maui and just how bad that disaster was and still is, right? From what we're seeing, it doesn't look like, you can call this recovery at this point. It's still ongoing and the fires are still burning. None of them are fully contained. They have 80% containment on one. But yeah, we'll go into this more in the fire. We'll talk about the fires a little bit more later. But yeah, that's just what I'm thinking about, and just all the missing people that we've been seeing on Tracker, and then on the open source, the community-driven missing persons Google Doc.
Yeah.
So
that's in everyone's mind. We certainly acknowledge that. So we'll just mention it here up top, and we'll, like Dane said, we'll come back to it and mention it briefly at the end. It's not our intention to cover the Maui fires like we cover volcanoes here. It's not our Kuleana. We don't know enough, and we want to make sure we say things right when we say them. So we should make sure everyone's aware in case you have not heard this news somehow in any other way, and it's just hold space for that as well. So that's today, August 10th. Now that we've said that, maybe we should get into it, Dan, unless you got anything else you want to say before we get into a volcano summary.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions about Hawaiian volcanoes, go ahead and drop those in the chat, but we're really not going to be able to answer much about the Maui fires.
Right on. Dan will be leading the discussion on chat as we go here. So, okay, that said, let's get into our weekly Hawaiian volcano summary. And, that's not it. There it is. All right. So in this week's Hawaiian volcano summary, you can see here the map of earthquakes at Kilauea Summit over the past week. The earthquakes continue to occur at slightly elevated levels. You see a lot of dots on the map here because they're accumulating over the week, but these are not levels of activity that we have seen prior. It gets a lot more busy than this on the map before an eruption actually occurs. So it's still building up, still building pressure. We see that through these earthquakes as well as the inflation of the volcano, which is expressed through the ground tilt and the GPS. But you can see where the earthquakes are located at the summit there, and here are the rates over the past month. So this is time on the bottom, and earthquakes per day here on this axis. The maximum value up here is 80 earthquakes per day. And so we've been reaching 50 earthquakes per day for the last couple of days, and on average around there for most of the week here. And that's a little bit higher than we saw previously in about a month ago, where it was down at these lower levels of 20 to 30 earthquakes per day or so. So we see we had a little peak, and it's increased here, and it's kind of undulating, cycling through more and less earthquakes as we go on. So that just shows that the pressure is not building constantly. We expect before an eruption that these will actually be at much higher levels of earthquakes per day, but also not dropping down with these little gaps in between as well. So you start to see it kind of shifting up towards being more pressurized and towards an eruption eventually, but there's not any sign of that happening imminently. Similar sort of to what we had last week and the week before, as far as the earthquakes being more elevated. And you can see here they're a little bit higher than last week, but still fluctuating a little bit here on Kilauea. On Mauna Loa, we reported last week that the earthquakes, even though they were at low levels, they continue that way still today. Earthquakes per day here, maximum of about 4 over the last week here. What we were curious last week was the depth of the earthquakes occurring deep under Mauna Loa Summit. So here's depth against time for the last week. And you see earlier in the week, there were still some rumblings down at 40 kilometers depth, the deep earthquakes under the summit. But really over the last week and a half-ish, right around in here or so, right? You see there's very few, just the one event occurring deep under Mauna Loa Summit there. So earlier in the month, there are a lot more of those. And more recently, still a few, but slowed down quite a bit. So to recap what we discussed last week in our full update, this might indicate a batch of magma coming into Mauna Loa magma reservoir system from below But that's not any surprise because we know the volcano is also swelling and inflating as it recovers from its eruption in 2022. So in summary, everything is normal with both volcanoes. They're both filling and swelling. Kilauea with more earthquakes, Mauna Loa with less. And that's our Hawaiian volcano summary for the week. So we'll take you guys now to look at the volcanic hazards, which is still the gas. I thought I would just show you today the purple air plot. Here it is, and showing green across most of the island. A few spots that are showing some abnormalities that where they usually come up. So maybe some more industrial sources near there. Interestingly, even though we've had all that fire in the last couple of days here, the air seems to have cleared out even here in a Kohala, North Kona area where the fires were impacting Hawaii Island. So the air quality looks good, both from volcanoes and fires, as we can see here. I will not show the VOG mapping project animation today because there's really not much on there to show you guys. And I want to kind of speed it along here a little bit. So really very little impact from volcano. The emission levels are still pretty low. We'll show you that here shortly. And that means the impact is small, except for those who are still living nearby the volcano and are downwind areas. So that would probably be in here-ish or so, right? Sometimes that spreads down to Pahala as well, but so far so good, as you see on this plot for today. So that's the hazards. We'll move on to our monitoring with the update from USGS for this week. So this is from a couple days ago on Tuesday, August 8th. And we are still at alert level advisory, aviation color code yellow. No real changes on the update. And the update also says no real changes on the volcano. Not erupting, no significant changes on the summit at either rift zone over the past week. The most recent SO2 measurement rate is 121 tons per day, measured August 6th. And no lava since June 19th. They do note here a slight increase in the number of events of earthquakes compared to previous weeks, including a small flurry that occurred on August 6th. Net minor inflation, and that's the same story as you've seen here recently. So nothing else to really highlight in the update there. And it's the typical thing we've seen over the last couple of weeks here. So we'll move on to our graphs and show you guys first the tilt. Here's 2-day tilt. And this is pretty zoomed in, but you can see that's been rising most of the last 2 days after this data restoration here, a little bit of data gap at the left end of the screen here. I prefer to look at the more zoomed out views. Here's the last week. So there it is. Not quite the obvious data gap here. So it's reminding us that this straight line from here to here, it's like filling in something. Right. In any case, from where it was a week ago to where it is now, it's definitely been inflating, even if we lost some of the nuance in between. Sometimes it does rise a little faster or a little slower, as you see here at the right end. But the takeaway is it's inflating still long term. No change there. No change really on the pattern we see daily on a summit lava lake depth, with that apparent contraction, likely something embedded in a instrumentation or measuring approach, right? So we're not quite sure how much of that is actually variation of the lake surface itself or of the instrument that's measuring it. In any case, it's a fairly minor amount. And if you zoom out to the last month, you still see that it's fairly small variation here. And more important is a long-term decrease of this line, which is very, very slightly going down here. So it is contracting and cooling very slowly there. And if you haven't joined us previously, this data scatter over here is some fog and rain that got in the way of the laser while I was measuring this earlier in the month here. So all quiet on Kilauea too. The crust and the surface is all stable there, not moving at all. So zooming out to the last month for the tilt as well, this is the same story. We go from -6 microradians to +7 microradians, +8 up there. So we're looking at 14 microradians of gain in the last month. That's still pretty healthy there. So the volcano is definitely swelling and tilting outwards. That's filling with magma below. The ground is swelling and tilting away from the center there. And that's been unchanged ever since we saw that eruption end in mid-June. So it's still swelling and now quaking more and more. On the rift zone, the pattern is still that of deflation, and that's the important thing, the blue line here. This was the rainfall signal that associated with Tropical Storm Calvin earlier in the month. And here, otherwise, you see that deflation contraction as the sides of the rift zone are kind of sagging inwards back down as they're still relaxing following the 2018 eruption. That's been mostly the pattern there after some recalibration following the collapse and end of eruption back in 2018, 2019. SO2 is pretty low here. You don't really see a whole lot of pattern. It looks kind of scattered a little bit, only because we're so far zoomed in tons per day here, 80 to 180 tons per day. This is all really low. Normally all those would be really flat compared to what we see during eruptions, where it'd be the thousands or tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands of tons per day of SO2 coming out. So still quiet as far as gas on the surface. That's why the VOG impact is relatively low. However, just as we state every week, this 120 tons per day is still exceeding EPA regulations for any industry. So it's not like it's nothing and it can be ignored. People who live nearby certainly can still have impacts there. Okay, GPS for the last year. This is north and south across Kilauea caldera. Still increasing, meaning that north and south are still getting further and further apart. Maybe if we look closely, we might convince ourselves that it might be slightly wiggling. Sometimes it wiggles a little less and a little more. Maybe it's going a little less, a little more. It's hard to tell, and it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things that much. It's more the big picture of it's still swelling, and you can see that we've way stretched out past where we busted the last time for the eruption in June back over here. And we've actually reached a higher level. Not that that really matters. So the whole ground is adjusting and changing, and it doesn't mean it's ready to pop right now. It just goes to show how dynamic the volcano actually is, with its sides moving and swelling and migrating all the time. And then on top of that, it's filling and pressurizing with magma and bursting out. So there it is, the combined signal. That's why we need to look at all the various signals together, the GPS and the tilt and the gas and the earthquakes all together to get the full picture of how close we actually are. So getting a little bit closer now that the earthquakes have come up, but we're still missing the finer details, like the gas and the actual earthquake levels are not quite high enough yet either. On the rift zone at Pu'u'o, this is north and south across the rift zone, middle east rift zone near Pu'u'o. And for the last year, you see it's contracting, the sides getting closer together, the line's getting shorter, so the distance is going down. Right? That's what you see here on a graph. Maybe if we look in closely, we could see that the average rate maybe has slowed a little bit there. If we try to average out that data, maybe it's slowed right through here and there. With a little bit more scatter. So that's something we've covered recently as well, that there is adjustment of the south flank as the summit is swelling and moving and pushing out towards the ocean. That wedge of land south of it has to move, and it's broken into different chunks so they can kind of get pushed and rotated and move around the rift zone and cause some different signals. And so as we saw from the tilt plot, the east rift zone is still deflating, kind of contracting. But now it seems like the rate of it getting closer together is slowing down a little bit. And perhaps that's a result of that south flank adjustment, we think is most likely. So that is the main monitoring signals. And now we'll switch to the earthquake signals, as we started off showing at the top of the hour here. And you can see, once again, the map of the earthquakes concentrated around Kilauea Summit. Note this real lack of earthquakes anywhere in the upper East Rift connector, the middle East Rift zone, lower East Rift zone, a whole bunch of nothing all through here. And so that's going to show us that pattern of it really being restricted to the summit area right in here. That piece of the south flank that I mentioned is this wedge right in here like this, that fits right in there. You can see here at its southern end, it's showing earthquake activity as well as it's trying to move out in that direction. And so this is where you can have this weird blocks moving out potentially to affect the signals over here in the Middle East Rift Zone. So this is pretty normal. It's getting visually interesting here. We would expect to see these dots get fuller and fuller, more crowded in this map as we build towards an eruption in the next few weeks to months here. Pahala earthquakes are still ongoing, maybe a little bit less in some weeks, but there they are down there in that southwest corner of this map. So there's a cross section, not a whole lot of new to pull out of there, but you see much shallower. There's a deep Pahala events. Here's the Kilauea Summit swelling pattern. And this is the one I think is usually more interesting to look at when we're having this off and on again pattern of earthquake swarms, depth against time. This is the last week from August 3rd to the 10th. And so Pahala earthquakes are happening down here. You see they're not continuous either, this blue band. And that's not continuous. That's the magma supply source deep down. So that's its own separate pattern. We're interested in looking at more so as this pattern up in the oranges here at the top. So there is a little bit of an earthquake flurry right there. There's another one there, another one there, another one there, and actually a bigger sequence of them that actually has one a little bit shallower right there. That's the August 6th that USGS picked out that one to mention in their update. You can see it's a little bit slower right through here with a couple of little events there and there. Another little flurry, one bigger event, that was a magnitude 3.2. That's the biggest difference between this week and last week, was the earthquakes got a little bit bigger. And you see here, starting before midnight last night and continuing till just a little while ago, another earthquake swarm occurring here in the shallows under Kilauea Summit. So there it is. 1 week map is not as useful as I think the 1 month, where you can really see in the last couple of days pick back up. There's that little gap we mentioned on the map, and the previous 3 days of flurries as well. And you can see how we're not quite to that peak we saw earlier in the month at 60 to 70 earthquakes per day, but getting pretty close there to that range. So elevated, but not quite critical here. For the last month, here's a whole image. So a little bit more populated. You can see more of the pattern of filling and pressurization at the summit, more of the south flank pattern back in here, and Pahala magma supply is still really healthy down there. Okay, move past the cross section, and here's earlier in the month. You can see where we didn't have this shallow earthquake activity earlier in the month. There was a lot less, and really in the last 3 weeks, how it's really picked up there. That's what's really the take-home message here. So over the last year, you see here's our bump starting to come above the background we've been seeing prior to the last few weeks here, but not quite the levels that we saw prior to the June eruption or to the January eruption earlier this year as well. So that is the earthquakes here. And with that, we will switch to our Mauna Loa monitoring. Let's get that on the screen here and show you guys those basics. And so it's still inflating, still swelling, filling with magma. You see that in the tilt. The GPS is still not showing up online. Earthquake rates are still low. Here they are in a context of the whole last year, still very low values. But what's more interesting was the fact that they were happening in that deep area. So here's a last month plot, and these are colored by depth. So it's these blue dots right in here, blue and purple ones. Here's the blue ones. If you add purple, you can get a bigger area. These earthquakes occurring deep under Mauna Loa here. So they're still there, but as we showed in our summary above, we look at the depth versus time, and you can see that this band for the last month, you see here, this is from July 11th to August 10th. For the last month, the first couple of weeks had some more activity at that depth, and really in the last 2 weeks, you only had a couple isolated events and no continuous deep activity. So that's not surprising. We laid out last week how that could just be the beginning of the pulse, and we could have a reoccurrence of that pulse in months or years ahead. Yeah, and the 2002 to 2005 era, it took 3 years for that to actually come about. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. But no change in the prognosis. It's still filling with magma. It's still going to erupt again at some point someday, but it's not anywhere close to that quite yet. So that is Mauna Loa, and I thought we would cover our community corner. We're not going to share a whole lot on that this week. Just to remind you guys that there is still the EA, environmental assessment for the County Hawaii Puna Road and Waterline project is still open. It'll be open until next month, early next month. So comments must be in writing. So you can come here to the Kilauea Recovery homepage, and this is it right here, and come down. You can come down to this point where they actually say all comments received in writing through September 5th. Here's an email address you can click on, or you could mail it in if you want. And that's how to find it. Google Kilauea Recovery to get to this homepage to submit your comment. And the other thing, of course, in our community's mind is the Lahaina and Maui fires. So just to show you something on that, right? Starting off here in the Big Island, this is a NASA firms of the island of Hawaii fires. There was the one near Waimea, one down by Spencer, Mauna Kea Beach, and then one up by Kohala Ranch further up here. But all those are fully contained. Really, there's not, I mean, there was certainly impact, but it's not really worth talking about in a context of what happened over on Maui. So we'll just move on and show you guys Maui. This is a NASA image of the active fires on Maui from August 8th, infrared. So Kihei had a fire upslope, but really it's this left part of the image. Lahaina right in there blown up. You can see is what really got hit the hardest by that fire. So just to show you guys the extent of the town and what was burning at that capture time, and show you a couple of images here. This is now on Hawaii Tracker. So this is from Linda J. Smith, Lahaina before and after. She's taken 2 images here, one from Google Earth right there, and then one taken from that helicopter overflight, and compare the two here so you can see. And I can try to zoom this in maybe a little bit more, but it's hard to get it exactly so you can see it all. But there's not much left still standing. You can see the same shapes in there. But really, it's pretty tragic to see the difference there, top to bottom. So before and after in Lahaina. Here's another one that Dane posted, taken from Maxar satellite capture. There's after and before. It's a little bit harder to see. You can see all the structures are intact here. If I go to the after, the same shapes, but it all just looks like white ash in the shapes of houses, except for a couple spots. You can see what's left, right? I can highlight what's left. There's one there, there's one there, there's one there, one there. There's not a whole lot that's actually left still. Most of it is gone. I think I've heard estimates of maybe 80% of the town being destroyed here. So that's the couple just images we can show you to have you understand the scale of what's happened there. If you really want more information, I urge you to go to the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group. I know that not everyone is on Facebook. This Facebook group is public, right? Which means you don't have to have an account or be a member to see what's in the group. If you want to interact with the group, then you will have to do that. If you want to, for example, post a comment or leave your own information there, you would have to do that. But it's possible to, I think now that Dane, maybe you can help me with this. Maybe they might have some kind of anonymous feature now where people can submit something. I'm not sure how that works exactly, but in any case, you should be able to go and see what's on a group regardless, even if you don't have an account there, and you can look for more information on the information coming out of Maui or Hawaii Island, including our volcano stuff here.
Yeah, you're still gonna need an account either way to do the anonymous feature.
To comment anonymously. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
All right, so that's it for today. I wanted to keep it a little bit shorter. What do you want to add here, Dane? While we're
I mean, just the Maui situation's on everybody's minds. Kind of don't want to go really deep into it because it's still unfolding. It's there. I mean, we're not going to show the footage of it because it's really heavy stuff in there. So we're just gonna, talk about it a little bit. We encourage anybody that wants to help and contribute to this, disaster, to take use of the Hawaii Community Foundation and the Maui Strong Fund. We'll vouch for the Hawaii Community Foundation. There's a whole lot of people out there trying to raise money right now, and we're only trying to send people to the ones that we trust the most, and we know how they use their funds. We've worked with them before. Things along those lines, right? And we did have experience in 2018 with many of the same organizations. So we're trying to defer based upon experience. But yes, Hawaii Community Foundation, full support. I'll drop the link in the chat. I think Lou has it pinned already, but one in case anybody missed it. Do want to thank everybody that tuned out today. I know we didn't do much of a volcano update. Phil was still able to get through it pretty well, but yeah, we just feel like trying to keep the bandwidth open for the news on Maui. There's still multiple missing, 800 missing people on that list right now, the open source Google Doc. Many of these people we don't know just what their situation is. I mean, there's no cell phone service, or really spotty cell phone service, no communications. Transportation is hindered. You have to go basically around the island the other way. It's really rough for trying to figure out just who is where, who got away, who's missing, who caught the worst of it. And so we're just all waiting and watching right now. There's only so much we can do to help. We know that supplies are not exactly making it into Lahaina, but it's such a difficult situation for everybody there, everybody involved. So we wish them the best. We hope that they are able to, endure as best as possible. As these situations are so terrible. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It's, these fires, they happen so fast. The campfire in Paradise is the closest thing that comes to mind, just with the speed of how it moved through, and the cars and unable to evacuate, stacked up on the road, swept by fire, those types of things, terrible things.
So, any final things? Just want to say mahalo to
Yeah.
Sky Ed here.
Yeah,
Appreciate you, Ed. All you guys in the chat, thank you for coming and being part of the community and caring for each other in times like this. Any last things, Dane, before we get out of here?
No, we will just announce that we have not rescheduled the postponed live stream from yesterday, the episode on the recovery on the roads from the 2018 eruption. We will reschedule that, and we'll let you guys know when that's upcoming. But as of right now, not scheduled.
Right on. I appreciate it, Dane, and I'm sure we could talk for longer. I think we all kind of need to get some stuff out, but at the same time, I don't want to really, as you said, clog up the airwaves here. So I appreciate you guys. We'll be back next week. We'll talk about it some more then, I'm sure. This is a massive, massive event. We'll be talking about this for years to come. This is a 2018 eruption catastrophe level with all the fatalities on top of it, right? And all happening in one day. So that's really it's really hard, really overwhelming, hard to really get a grip on it. And so we'll come back next week and keep processing with you guys as well. But for now, we'll sign off from HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. I'm Philip Ong. He's Dan DuPont. Aloha, everybody.